Hi there, I'm Nikki from All About the Yarn, and I am going to introduce you to the concept of the magic loop technique. So the chances are that you've either signed on for one of our courses or downloaded one of my patterns, and hopefully you'll find this really helpful. So I have cast on some stitches, 30 stitches, and I'm going to knit a couple of rows flat before I join. When you're feeling more confident, you can absolutely join straight after you cast on. Got to be careful not to twist it, and that's just a little bit easier if you've got a little bit of flat knitting hanging down underneath. So I'm going to start off with a 1x1 rib. So we just knit straight across. And when I get to the end of this row, I'll turn and go back the other way. And then I will come back to you. Right, so I've just done a couple of rows of ribbing just for demonstration. You just do whatever your pattern says. And I now want to join in the round and start the magic loop technique. It's basically so we can knit a small circumference, okay? So if your circular needle is too long for the circumference of what you want to do, then you either have to use double pointed needles or this magic loop technique, which actually uses a long circular needle, and you'll see why in a moment. So I've done 30 stitches, so I'm just going to count down halfway. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. And that's my halfway point. It's easiest to do it there. And so I pull all of them onto the cable, and then I get the cable that's in between the two stitches, and I just pull that through. So now I've divided the stitches in half, and I'm going to pull that right through, so that for now I get all the stitches up onto the two needle tips. Now the good thing about the fact that we did a bit flat first was you can easily see if this gets at all twisted. So for example, if it was like that, so you can follow round the edge of your stitches and just check there's no twist there. Right, once you've put all the stitches onto the needle tips, you want to make sure your working yarn is at the back and that it's not trapped between the two needles as we do this. So I'm just going to pop it over there for a second. I'm going to pull the back needle to the right. So if you're always thinking of moving clockwise, so we want to pull the needle so that the stitches go onto the cable, not the other way round because you'll lose all your stitches. And I'm just going to bring that in and knit the first stitch then on the other needle, on the front needle. And I'm just going to get going in stocking stitch now. So again, you would be doing whatever your pattern says, but I'm just going to knit all the stitches. So I always tug the first and second stitch after I change the needles, and that can help prevent getting a loose ladder up the side of your work. So we're going to knit across to the end of this needle, and remember that's only half of our stitches, so that's not a complete round yet. So if I get to the end, and then I'll show you what we do. Okay, so I've now emptied that left-hand needle. But I want to get around here and do the other side of my work. So we turn the work, and again thinking clockwise. So I've got my working yarn on that back needle again. We need to get these stitches that are currently on the front bit of the cable onto the needle tip. So I'm going to pull the cable. And again, don't want to pull it the other way. I don't want to lose all my stitches off the needles. Then when I get to that point, I sort of push the needle in from that side. Just where you've got the stitch at that end of the back needle, that can make that a bit tight as it pulls where you're trying to get from the cable back onto the needle. So if at that point I'm feeling it's not wanting to go much further, I pull the back needle now, okay? But you can do it once you've got all your stitches up to the tip. So I've pulled that back needle just like I did at the start. And that just loosens that back one up a little bit, and I can now get those needles stitches onto the front needle. So I've actually ended up in the same position where I started. I'm halfway through the round. So now I'm going to knit across these stitches. So I'll just give that first stitch a gentle pull. And the second stitch as well. Just snug that up a little bit. If you pull too tight, you're really going to get a small stitch the other side. So it's a bit of trial and error and getting a feel for it. But after you've done it a few times, you'll soon be there. Okay, so we're just going to knit across. And when I get to the end of this needle, that's my last stitch. I've now gone across both needles, and that means I've completed one round. You can see I've got back to my cast on tail, so that's always a good one. I sometimes put a stitch marker, a locking stitch marker in my work at that point as a visual reminder, because you can get a little bit confused and think that halfway round is the end of your round. So that's really helpful. If you put a stitch marker on the needle, then it will tend to slip off every time you get to halfway round. Right, so for the next round, all I do is turn the needles again. Remember, we're going clockwise. Now my working yarn's at the back again. I'm going to pull the cable at the front so that these stitches end up on the front needle tip. Wiggle that in a bit. Now I'm going to pull this back needle loose. So if at this point these don't want to go on, although they have done this time, so I can shove them all the way up to the tip and then bring that back needle loose. You'll find, you get into a rhythm of where you like to do it. So now I'm going to pull that back needle to the right, going clockwise, making sure that working yarn doesn't get sort of trapped down in between the needles. And in I go to start the next round. Snug the first, snug the second, and knit across. And you just keep doing that. The main thing is keeping track of when you've got to the end of a complete round. But as I said, if you're always working back to your cast on tail, or you've put a little locking stitch marker in, that can be really, really helpful. And just round and round you go. Okay, just got to the halfway round. You can turn the whole thing clockwise. Bring that front cable so I get the front stitches onto the front needle tip. Pull the back one loose. And hopefully you can see why we've got this long circular needle is because we need this cable to bend round at either end, and that's what enables us to do the small circumference. So if your circular needle is on the shorter side, this becomes quite fiddly or just impossible. Snug the first, snug the second, and off we go. When it comes to casting off, you'll just do your normal cast off. And when you've finished, if you've started with a couple of flat rows, you'll just need to just use your cast on tail to just seam up the small gap. And that is Magic Loop. Thank you for watching.